Hi everyone, I'm Stott, I'm a Principal Cloud Advocate at Microsoft. I'm here today with Jeff Hollan, who's a Partner Director for Foundry Agents. So Jeff, it's great to have you here. Do you want to give a bit of an introduction about your role and what you're doing at Microsoft?
Sure, yeah. This has been so much fun being here at Build, being here with all of these different builders. As you mentioned, I'm on the product management side working in Foundry. Specifically what my team is working on are all things agents. So how builders can go choose the right model, get their agents up and running, all of the different components needed for an agent, whether it's the tools or the evaluations, or even just how you can get it hosted at cloud scale. That's what we're focused on, and helping different developers and builders and enterprises build that for their teams.
Yeah, so hosted agents is a fairly new product. We've just gone to preview. So can you tell us a bit about, what is hosted agents? People are used to prompt-based agents.
That's right.
What's the difference?
Yeah, so this is a big update that released a few months ago now. The way that I like to think of it is, so you could go into Foundry, even today you can go into Foundry and you can say, hey, here's the agent that I want to build. Maybe I'm going to give it a set of instructions. Here's some tools that it can configure. But I'm really leaving a lot of it up to the model itself to decide how to execute the agent. What hosted agents brings in is now I'm bringing my own agent code, or in some cases my agent harness, if you want to use some of the cool terminology. So whether you're using something like LangGraph, or Microsoft Agent Framework, or the Anthropic Agent SDK, or the GitHub Copilot SDK, there's so many amazing code-based tools that you can use to define your agent. You can write that code, test it all locally, and then in hosted agents, we will go run it for you. But beyond just running it for you, we will connect it to the right models, give you access to tools, observability, a bunch of other pieces. So this lets you write the agent the way you want to write it, but then have it be wholly hosted at scaled, all inside of Foundry.
So that's really interesting. You talked about both Microsoft products, like coming from Microsoft Agent Framework or Microsoft Agent Services, and then all the open source things like LangChain, LangGraph, CrewAI. So what do you feel like are the biggest gaps between taking that prototype, I've built an agent, it's a prompt-based agent, and now want to take it to production? What are the steps available in the hosted agent framework to do that?
Yeah, I think what we see a lot right now, like in the era of coding agents that we live in, actually writing that agent prototype can actually be done fairly quickly. Like you could open up GitHub Copilot CLI or Visual Studio Code with GitHub Copilot and say, hey, build me an agent in .NET, in Python, in whatever you want. And it will probably have something that you could be running within an hour or two. Like that's actually to the point of like prototype pretty quick. Oftentimes what I'm seeing in that gap between prototype to production, a lot of the big considerations, especially for enterprises, comes around quality. It's I want to make sure as people are interacting with this agent that they're getting the right answers. I think a lot of the effort that comes into that just comes around, actually for those who are watching, the last session we just heard from, around evaluations, around observability. It's how do you make sure you have the right pieces so that you're testing and confirming and saying, hey, if I go give this to my chief finance officer and they ask, how are we tracking towards our quarterly guidance? You really want to make sure that that agent is giving you the right answers. I think the other pieces around production grade, two more that come to mind quickly would be, one is just scale and reliability. Yep. I want to make sure, even if I'm using some of these advanced agent patterns, that I have something that could scale to hundreds or thousands or maybe even millions of different users. So there's a component of scale in there as well. Yeah, I think those are the big ones, actually. And versioning and kind of lifecycle management would be the only other third.
So it's that whole observability piece.
It's all that, the tried and true DevOps process that we love to talk about for about a decade now. It all stays true with agents, right? We have different tools, there's a few different words, but it's the same type of pattern that we've been building for a while now.
So one of the biggest challenges, lots of developers are talking about now is about identity. Agents are now becoming to have a real identity, and developers are now becoming managers of multiple agents. So how are we thinking about the identity, the security, and the isolation of these agents on both the developer's perspective and on an organizational perspective? Yeah,
this is an area I'm actually really proud of what Microsoft has done here. So I only jumped into this role about 4 months ago, and for me, one of the biggest learnings that I had was how impressive Entra's agent identity is. This really is ahead of the curve here and has some great patterns. So with Entra Agent Identity, we have these first-class patterns for you to do the regular type of authentication that I think we're used to, which is, hey, I have something like a managed identity or service principal, I want to give it access to perform, connectivity to this database or to these Azure services. It also does some other pieces, like on behalf of identity. So if I'm talking to the agent and it needs to access my inbox, it's able to get my consent and use my identity. What's nice about Entra Agent Identity, though, is it does those patterns. It can also have its own standalone kind of fully autopilot type identity, but you get good telemetry and tracking across. So like I know whether Jeff is talking to this email or it is Jeff's identity talking to this email through an agent. And that's a really important extra piece. So the nice part about Foundry and even these hosted agents is any agent you build, we just give you an agent identity out of the box. You don't have to go wire this up and configure it. We'll just say, hey, we know you're building an agent because you're using the agent service. Here's your agent identity that you can go configure to do some of these patterns. So it's actually really cool what's possible between Foundry and Entra Agent Identity.
And I think another key aspect of that is the new role position. So we've gone from Azure AI user to now Foundry user, Foundry project manager. So, between this change of the new security boundaries, how is this like really balancing that flexibility developers building enterprise governance into their agents?
Yeah, and this is an area you're even going to see continue to iterate. We want to make sure we have, I guess, there's a lot of investments happening on both sides. The first one is, as you are a builder or an operator, how do you make sure you have the right roles and access controls, to your point around Foundry user, Foundry contributor, Foundry observability, so that you are able to do the roles that you want in a least privileged way.
Right. Yep.
And then there's the other side of it, which is, well, my agent also needs to be able to perform tasks, sometimes fully autonomously. How do I make sure I have the right guardrails and controls so that it only does what I want it to do? Even down, right now there's a lot of effort, maybe a little bit of a preview things to come. Hey, this has access to this MCP tool, but I only want to be able to call these 3 tools. The other 2 things that might be described, I need to be able to restrict that. We know that people want their agent to be flexible, but you want to make sure you're doing it in a responsible way. So this is a huge effort for the team. Matthew Henderson on the team right now is focused on this full time, just the types of things you've been asking about.
And again, this is really going back into that, prototype to production. So once we have our applications in production, our agents in production, what do you think are the things that developers are starting to underestimate at this time? Because agents are still really new, and hosted agents are very new.
I think, honestly, if there's one thing that I think I come across the most is it's underestimating how powerful an agent can be if you get out of the way. And I know this is very scary, and it's almost contradictory to what I was just saying before around governance, and that's why we try to have the balance of both. I think as people start to go into production, there is a type of agent that you can build which is very, very constrained, almost like a deterministic workflow. And there's value to that. I don't want to say there's nothing really there. But I think what I look at what's inspiring the imagination of both myself and for users in the community with things like OpenClaw or Hermes Agent or even GitHub Copilot CLI, it's, wow, if we can get a robust agent harness with a powerful model, I actually don't have to predefine in advance all of these things that are possible for the agent. So I think the thing that actually comes to mind when you talk about underestimating, it's that, hey, my agent can actually start to add value in a lot more places that I might be appreciating from the get-go. So my recommendation to everyone here would be doing that type of experimentation, using a good harness, whether it's OpenClaw or Microsoft Agent Framework or GitHub Copilot SDK, and seeing what's possible as these things move into production.
Brilliant. So that's like a great first thing developers should do from watching build and being with us today, is like, what's the number one thing a developer should do?
I would say if there's one thing, it would be heading to the Microsoft Foundry documentation, and we have 3 quick starts you can choose from. But just getting your hands on these tools and trying them out. There's some great blogs. In fact, Lee, you've published a few in the last few.
We've got some great labs as well.
Great labs, great blogs. Like, there are so many opportunities. This is such a fun time to be a developer and a builder. Go explore one of these things, try it out, test it out, see what it can do, see what it can't do. That would be the #1 recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. It's been great speaking to you, and I hope you've all enjoyed Hosted Agents.
Thanks, Lee.